Welcome, everybody, to this emergency episode of the Slightly Above Average Gaming Podcast. I'm J007TV, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Sub1KD. Just a quick note before we get into this. This is what we've all been waiting for, comment from Call of Duty. But episode 20 is still going to be up on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts here shortly. We're working on that, but we wanted to go ahead and bring our commentary on this issue to you today. Sub, let's get it.
Yeah, thank you. So today in Call of Duty, we had an outstanding post land right about the time you and I were on the phone discussing what's going to break COD Twitter today. Apparently, it is not Fortune's Keep like we expected, like I expected. It is, in fact, Call of Duty's much anticipated matchmaking blog post. So in this blog post, they actually say they're going to discuss what they do and talk about for matchmaking and some of the a little more nitty gritty on it. This is specific to multiplayer. So for the Warzone fans out there, we're going to have to wait a little bit per their post. But I want to start launching into this. Jay, you got something?
Yeah, even though it is, and they do say it is on multiplayer, this is going to at least give you a general idea of what it's going to look like for the other modes. In my mind, I'm thinking that way. I don't know if you agree with that, but I mean, I'm sure they take parts of the same formula and just apply it over to matchmaking for the BR. So anyway, without further ado.
Yeah. So matchmaking, so here's their tweet that I opened up Twitter to and I almost fell over. I had to stop talking to my wife mid-reading it to reread it and make sure I was right. Call of Duty post, late last year, we committed to a conversation with our community about matchmaking, and boy, have we anticipated this. No more than I think Caps Lock, our friend of the pod, Caps Lock, does. Today's matchmaking intel is intended to kick off that dialogue and is a new beginning for what we hope will be an ongoing conversation about matchmaking, sharing our process and learnings with you to answer questions and concerns we've seen within the community. And then they link to the post. So, right off the bat, I'm just going to point out that it's a huge win for everyone that has harped on Call of Duty about their SBMM and all of those other aspects, because it's a lot of noise that has filtered through. And I promise that this is a Microsoft push. This did not come from the traditional Activision side. That this is a Microsoft saying, hey, you guys have a relations problem and you need to fix it. So
that's one thing Microsoft is very good at. If you notice, they don't have those kind of issues. And I will say this, Sub, not to cut you off too much, but you have had some really great tweets about SBMM. And I've tweeted about SBMM as early as this morning saying that's what should be flooding the timeline. So, this is a great opportunity, I think, for, us to go down this list and just see exactly how a lot of this actually lines up with things you've said.
There's a couple of posts that there's a couple of paragraphs that I could have written myself. So, all right. So it says, has a big long intro, a couple of paragraphs. I won't read it all the way through, but they do break down the elements that they talk about. So they have the matchmaking overview section. And so this gives, they give 8 different things that they consider when creating a lobby for multiplayer. So they say Call of Duty multiplayer matchmaking is composed of many factors. Number 1, connection. As the community will attest, ping is king. Connection is the most critical and heavily weighed factor in the matchmaking process. 2, time to match. This one actually, I have stories on this one. The factor is the second most critical to the matchmaking process. We all want to spend time playing the game rather than waiting for matches to start. The following factors are also critical to the matchmaking process. Player diversity, playlist diversity, the number of playlists available for players to choose from, recent maps and modes, considering maps you have recently played, as well as your mode preferences, editable in the quick play settings, skill and performance. This is used to give our players, a global community with a wide skill range, the opportunity to have an impact on every match. Input device, controller or mouse and keyboard, platform, the device, PC or console that you are playing on, and voice chat enabled or disabled.
That's the weirdest one to me, actually. The voice chat. It's weird that that's actually a factor.
Um, it's I would wager that it does take into consideration whether or not you have your mic plugged in. Whether you use it or not is totally different. But I'll bet it's just it's a binary mic plugged in, yes, no.
It's also interesting that they're doing it based off of input device. The platform one is kind of weird to me because I'm on PC and I launch through BattleNet. Some people do launch through Steam. But when I'm in a lobby, specifically, I play a lot of multiplayer still, and I'm in a lobby, it's primarily consoles.
Well, I think it's a combination of ultimately a combination of factors. Console lobbies have predominantly been grouped together. So as a lifetime console player, I can tell you that that predominantly we'll see consoles playing in a lobby together. So not like Xbox lobbies or PlayStation lobbies, but PlayStation, Xbox together.
And they should.
Yeah, and this is back in 2019 when I used to play before Warzone when I was playing 2019 with a buddy of mine. Like we would be very hesitant to play a lobby if there were more than like one or two PCs in it because it was just we had a low trust factor. Sorry.
But no, I don't blame you. And so I want to make a point, but I'll address what you just said. I actually have felt the same way as far as from a trust standpoint. And the reason why is because if you look at it, 2019 is what brought in cross-plat, right? Mm-hmm. That's what brought in being able to mix all three of the different platforms. But what's weird about this, and just the overall lobby breakdown when I look at it, like when I'm in multiplayer, when they were going through the acquisition of, Activision by Microsoft, they released what the overall player base looked at, right? And just so
Kotick attested to it.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and go back through what that is quickly. 51% of the monthly and daily active users were Call of Duty Mobile.
Yep.
The surprising one was 25% was actually PC, followed by 16% PlayStation and 8% Xbox. So you figure, take out the mobile side of it, right? Like they matter, but for our purposes of what we do, they don't matter for this discussion. So you figure of the remaining player base, you still have 1% more PCs than play the consoles. But I'm not really seeing that many more PCs in my lobbies. I mean, I see some. I don't know. I haven't paid attention to quite what the breakdown is, but I still see a lot of consoles.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think part of it is, I think there's a preference for that. And, back obviously 2019, the split was much more console heavy. I haven't paid nearly enough attention this time around, but I do see it to be it's still console heavy because I am on console. I'm going to tend to see that more, but I think it also tracks, some of these other factors. So you do have some skill issues. You do have, some of the playlist issues. The input device is going to skew things a little bit. So I think generally, and it'd be interesting to know what percentage of PC players play on mouse and key, because I think those players tend to be more it tries to sequester those players more together compared to controller players. So that's probably why in a controller lobby, you're less likely to see you'll see fewer PCs than the actual ratio of players, because a lot of the PCs they're going to use mouse and key on console, which is possible, and I've done it. I played on that, but
my buddy Dan
it's
does
that. Yeah, but it's a unicorn, right? Like when I played on mouse and key, I mean, I maybe ran into one other console with mouse and key in a year.
Do you think that they're doing that because they know that keyboard and mouse up close, that's the one disadvantage that they're at, and the majority of the fights in multiplayer are up close? So do you think they're doing that to try to account for the aim assist thing?
100%. 100%. They want like, as much as we all like to say that, oh, they hate everybody, they hate their players, and they just want everyone to be miserable. I don't believe that. And with the fact that mouse and key doesn't have the same strengths as controller does, especially in this game, grouping as many mouse and key players together is actually probably a smarter play than trying to factor other aspects in.
Right, and you know what? At the end of the day, miserable players don't spend money either.
Yeah, facts. So I think that skews the PC a little bit away from controller lobbies. So you would see, you probably see more of like a 1/3. Like I see about a 1/3 to 40% PCs in lobbies most of the time.
Do you think that they break it down further by launch client, like whether it's BattleNet or if it's Steam when they're talking about the platforms, or no?
Probably not.
You don't think so?
No, this is about comparing apples and oranges, right? They want to pair the right number of apples to the right number of oranges, PCs and consoles.
Well, let me throw this out there to you though. Wouldn't you would think BattleNet, which is run by whom? Activision. Right. Steam is not run by Activision. While they're generating sales through Steam on a much smaller scale than BattleNet, wouldn't you think they would get the matchmaking advantages? As far as like when you start looking at like what their second factor was, time to match, those kind of things.
I mean, my understanding is that you can look as a PC player and see the launcher. So yeah, if you don't see any Steam launchers, it's probably because there aren't any, because no one uses that thing.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even remember the last time. I can't remember the last time I saw Steam. I mean, I see BattleNet all the time. It's just something. Again, I'm just throwing that out there for conversation.
They don't address it. Yeah, they don't address it. So, I mean, the speculation on that is just that we're just guessing.
What's the thing in here that stood out to you or makes you feel the most vindicated based on the last couple months of tweets, and just other conversations that we've had on and off of this podcast?
Okay, so I think they recognize that ping is king. They acknowledge that, and one thing that I think that they are trying to do is trying to balance the ping in the lobby, so you don't have a 1 ping player versus a 90 ping player. Because you could have, with dedicated servers, you could have that where you have someone who lives next door to the server center on their fiber, right? And someone else who lives 100 miles away and doesn't have fiber, but that's their closest network. Like the two of them, like can play on the same, like they're playing the closest server to each other, and there's a massive ping disparity.
Well, look at our matches, right? Like when you play with me, because I've got that server center right here in Dallas. And it's crazy to me, like if you see the maps that have come out that kind of show, and I think you've shared that too.
Yep.
The Dallas server is literally the only one in the central United States. And yeah, it is right in my backyard. So your ping when we play together is usually what, 50 or 60?
Yeah.
I'm rocking a 5.
Yep.
Typically that's about where I stay. And a lot of the guys I play with are in the central part of the country too. Like a couple of my buddies are from Missouri. So they're on the same exact server that I am, I believe.
Right.
Whereas like number 2 plays on the east side, Jigsy plays on the east as well. You're on the west, Lee Pay's on the west. So like the ping thing, like you said, definitely stands out to me. Specifically, I notice it more so when we play together, you and I.
Yeah, and you have to keep in mind that Warzone is going to have a different scenario because we have a deeper set of players that you have to match, and so you're likely to get pulled. You are possibly even going to get pulled away from your home server because otherwise, you're yanking people, way too, their ping is way too high to be able to play that server, right? So you suffer a little bit because of distance. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. I see that like when I play. With people like on the East Coast, like sometimes, we'll get all thrown. We probably get thrown into your Texas lobby because I'll go up to like 50 and they're all at like 30 from the East Coast.
Sure.
I mean, it's like, okay, that makes more sense. Or like the Midwest.
Yeah. My buddy who's in Houston, he has, it's not a cheat program. I don't know what it is or how it works, but he was able to look and see what server it was tying him to, and I guess it was tying him to one in the UK. He's like, "What the fuck am I doing showing up in Ireland, man?" Like,
yeah.
It's
So
crazy how that works.
But as far as like what's I think the meat and potatoes, the one everybody wants to know is the measuring skill for matchmaking. So this section, let me read this section, and then I want to pick it apart and kind of look through some of these, talk through some of these aspects. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna highlight a paragraph that I swear I just wrote this thing like 3 times this week. Measuring skill for matchmaking. While skill is one of the several factors in Call of Duty multiplayer matchmaking, we know the community wants more information about how it fits into the process. Skill is determined based on a player's overall performance. Kills, deaths, wins, losses, and more, including mode selection and recent matches, as an overall metric across all multiplayer experiences. And that's something you've talked about before. This is a fluid measurement that's consistently updating and reacting to your gameplay. Skill is not only a factor in matchmaking players against appropriate enemies, but also in finding teammates. Call of Duty has historically considered player performance, among other factors, as part of our matchmaking process. Our work in this area dates back as early as Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare 2007. Skill is implemented across the video game industry, and we recognize that continuous refinement is required to deliver the best possible experience for our players. We use player performance to ensure that the disparity between the most skilled player in the lobby and the least skilled player in the lobby isn't so vast that players feel that match is a waste of time. Our data on player outcomes clearly indicates that the inclusion of skill in Call of Duty's multiplayer matchmaking process, as it currently stands, increases the variety of outcomes experienced by players of all skill levels. In other words, all players, regardless of skill level, are more likely to experience wins and losses more proportionately. Our data shows that when lower skill players are consistently on the losing end, they are likely to quit matches in progress or stop playing altogether. Heard that before. This has an effect on the player pool. A smaller player pool means wait times for matches increase and connections may not be as strong as they should be. This can compound over time to create a spiral effect. I wonder if I've heard that before. Eventually, when only high-skilled players remain because lower-skilled players have quit out of frustration, the result is an ecosystem that is worse overall for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Notice they said ecosystem. You know what that means, right?
All of it.
Well, I think basically what they're meaning there is people aren't on the game to spend money, so that's a problem.
Yeah, that's also a problem.
It's funny because, I feel like that aspect of it right there vindicates both of us in a way. More so you than me, because I didn't get as nuanced about that as you did, as far as that goes. But if you notice, they said recent games. They did say the cumulative part of it, but they emphasized recent games. And that tells me that that's weighted more so than the cumulative effect, because
I believe it.
Dude, I'm telling you, if I hop on there right now and have 5 good games, the next 2 hours I'm in there getting shit on by iridescent players. And we're talking strictly multiplayer here. So yep. I feel vindicated as far as that goes. And people would always say, well, nobody actually knows. It's like, yeah, we don't know, because up to this point it wasn't confirmed, but you can just go off of the evidence that's in front of you that you see and that you feel. And that's exactly what started happening in 2019. I wish that they would have acknowledged when they dialed this shit up, because I think it is 2019.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it feels like they overhauled it. I think also 2019, though, had a massive influx of players because of the timing of everything. So you had a deeper player pool than they've realistically had in the past during that time.
Sure.
Plus, it was also the return to Modern Warfare. So a lot of players came back, myself included, that had walked away. So I think you had a lot of different factors going on that affected how 2019 actually felt as a game. But I mean, I just want to drill in on that one paragraph about the lower skilled players. I mean, I literally had I tweeted this just yesterday, right? And I said it earlier before, and I've said it repeatedly. If you make a game that lower skilled players, that bad players of the game feel like they just can't do anything at, they're not going to spend hundreds of hours aim training and running drills to play the game and like to be able to actually win. Like they're just going to quit and find another game, right? And I think right now, in particular, a lot of those guys are playing Pal World. They're playing with their fake Pokemon. Okay, I've taken days off and just played with the fake Pokemon with the rocket launchers because it's fun. I don't have to put any thought into it. I can sit back with a couple of drinks and shoot little fake critters at each other and they blow up and everything's hey, I had a good time. And that's something that like with Call of Duty lately, it has felt that I have felt that if I am not sitting, zeroed in with, lines that you feel ready to go, I'm just gonna, bang bang back to the lobby.
It feels like just a sweat fest. Like, I mean, listen, we are slightly above average, but we're not considered sweats by any means. We're both capable of having very good matches. But it just feels like a lot of times, especially in multiplayer, that I'm having to put my fucking try-hard pants on almost every single match if I want to just break even. And, a lot of times I'll do better than that. But it feels like it's just been ratcheted up since 2019 to me. And, maybe that is actually partially because of how they're doing this skill-based matchmaking, or not partially, but it is because, like you said, and you did mention this twice at least that I can remember, with the pool of players, and you've said it several times in our conversation. So in that regard, I feel like you're fucking 100% spot on, man.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like, and so look, Call of Duty, like I played all the way back, the original one, right? Like when you had was it Call of Duty 2, I think, had the 1887 shotgun meta, which was hilarious and broken and so much fun.
Well, the double shotties too. Remember that?
Imagine how bad the Lockwood 300 double trigger is. Mm-hmm. Now imagine you have 8 rounds in each tube.
Jeez. And
you got 2 of them.
Wow.
That was the 1887 meta, right? I remember that because that was, way back when. And I bring that up because I have played this game so many times and it's been the same cycle every time. The game drops. But nobody knows really what they're doing. I mean, the really good players, the naturally good players will just pick it up and they're rocking and rolling day one. But most players, they got to learn maps, they got to learn the guns, they got to unlock it. And there's this like honeymoon period of like 2 or 3 months of like everyone's kind of figuring stuff out. And then you get it figured out, and then it starts being more work than fun, because you have to try hard. You have to put your try hard pants on, right? Because now everybody's figured it out. Now everyone's dialed in what they're doing. They know the maps. They know the jump points. They've memorized enough of the stuff. And the more casual players that don't have the maps memorized, that don't know exactly what guns to use, that don't have everything unlocked, like the players they're playing against, they start to do worse as they play, right? The rate at which they improve starts to decrease, versus the top players, the rate at which they improve increases. The delta between the top and the bottom continues to grow, and the bottom eventually starts quitting. And so you get about 6 months after release, and the game is mostly highly skilled players playing each other, which is great, and the guys that are dedicated and that put the effort in, they can have a great time, right? Like there's nothing, but you ever buy a game that's, halfway through its life cycle and you jump in and try and play a multiplayer match?
Well, I mean, that theory alone is right there why I won't go and play PUBG. I mean, because think about it. The people that are still playing PUBG never stopped and are playing, and that's all they're playing. And it is very fucking sweaty. While it's a lot slower pacing, but it is actually sweaty. So yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying, and I understand, and again, you were 100% correct in your assessment of of that portion of it. I just, like the question I posed to you earlier, though, and I know we're talking about the skill section of it, but couldn't they just turn off that part of it and just let the matches be random? Like, in my mind, a random match and getting shit on once every 5 or 6 matches is a lot better than having 5 good ones and then getting shit on for 2 hours.
I could tell you what I think on that, but as it happens, there's a question and answer section to this. And in that question and answer section, I have this. Have you ever considered an opt-in, opt-out system for the matchmaking algorithm? They say, our data suggests that splitting the player base with an opt-in, opt-out matchmaking system will have negative consequences on the overall player pool. That means potentially longer wait times based on the type of matchmaking selected, plus add into that playlist map mode, etc., and matches with poor connections. So in other words, fewer people are going to pick that mode, so that means they have to pull people from like Australia and the UK and Texas and throw them all into the same match because there's not enough people that want to play that mode. All right? And then everybody has a bad time.
Europeans.
Yeah, but at 200 ping. So, all right. So that's what they're saying on that one. Basically, if we split it off and not enough people play it, everybody has a bad time no matter what.
That sounds like a worry, though. Not really something that's been confirmed.
But have you ever tested removing skill as a consideration from matchmaking? We have run tests over the years to determine if removing skill as a consideration from matchmaking makes sense. We will continue to launch these tests periodically. To date, the data remains consistent with what we detailed above. Players tend to quit matches or stop playing if they're getting blown out, resulting in a negative overall experience for all players in the lobby and the general player population. We purposefully do not disclose when these tests occur because it may impact feedback or the data we see during these tests. Now, I'm going to tell you this. If you ever want to feel like you're telling some flat earther that the earth is actually round, try telling them there are times when you can tell that SBMM is turned off. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
The whole thing about that is I just think that, that's interesting that they're doing those tests. But to me, and maybe it's a mindset thing. Listen, if I'm getting shit on once in a while, fine. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Whatever. I might even have a bad 2 or 3 matches. Now, if it continues, then yes, I would definitely consider leaving a match. I probably leave 1 or 2 matches a session. Just because I'm just struggling or whatever. So yes, that does happen, but it's also like overall, I don't agree with the sentiment that just because if it's one match you get shit on and you leave every single time you're in a match like that. Like, because again, if it's random, you can't say it's going to happen like that every match. You might have 20 good matches in a row and then maybe 2 bad ones.
Sure.
And it might go the other way too.
So one thing that I want to point out, and this is something that we've kind of talked on before, and we've experienced this. I think everybody who's not like a 5 KD player has experienced this. Is that there are, there's a certain point in which player skill just begins to exponentially compound, right? Where it's not like like the difference between a 0.8 KD player and a 1 KD player is less than the difference between a 2 KD player and a 2.5 KD player. And it's not like, oh, it's a little bit more. It's like exponential leaps to be able to maintain that level of play, right? And so, and the distance between each little step increases exponentially the higher up the KD chain you go. Okay. And KD, this is like a bare bones, like easy to say way of measuring skill. Like everyone knows KD is like, it's just one aspect of skill. But I think the thing to keep in mind is that if you have Scump, right, or Biffle in a lobby of like 0.8s, those 0.8s are going 0 and like 50 in the first 5 minutes, and Scump is just going to like clear the match out on his own.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That sort of thing, when you break down, like so Warzone is my usual point to this because it is my main game.
Sure.
But like if you say I'm going to get, I have look at the bell curve of KD, right? Like, most 80% of the game is under 1 KD. So if you have 80% of the lobby is under 1 KD, and then you get the top 5% of the lobby, right? The top 5 players in a 100-player lobby are in that 2.0 and above. They're just going to mop through huge swaths of that lobby.
That's
and the
where
same
fucking
thing holds.
nuke runs come from.
Well, yeah, but if you take
You know?
out, but that's the point, right? Like if you have a mixed, if you have a mixed lobby, like a truly random lobby, you're gonna ultimately end up with somebody that is at the top end of the skill bracket, above the average of that lobby in almost every match. And all it takes in multiplayer, all it takes is one player who's just exponentially better than the rest of the people in that lobby to absolutely demolish it.
Jigsy
and
does
ruin
it
for
all
everyone.
the time. Jigsy does it all the time in multiplayer. That's exactly like you said. He will come into our lobbies, and while they feel a little harder for us, they're not hard for him. And he's fucking dropping 40 and 50 kills, dude, and like fucking kill confirmed. That's just the way he does it.
And the fact that I sit in the middle of that KD, like right around 1, means that I get those lobbies. And then I get the lobbies where I get somebody who's just like, I can't even look at without getting obliterated. Right?
Yeah.
Like I get both of those lobbies because I'm in that middle bracket. I feel like it's like a middle bracket. Like you could go either way. It doesn't, no match is it's a roll of the dice. Like, am I getting a great lobby where I'm going to drop 45, 50, 60? I mean, my highest last year was like 92, I think.
I thought you dropped 100, bro. Or are you talking about Modern Warfare 2?
Yeah. In the year before, I dropped. My highest was like 110 or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, so, but it's no fun. Like when you're on the wrong end of that, it's no fun. And so when matchmaking the way it is right now, when it, for me, when it's delivering that here and there, like that's one thing. But to have a scenario where you end up with somebody with, who's doing that in every single lobby, because most of my games end up where there's a fairly narrow gap between the best player in the lobby and like the average of the lobby.
Sure.
Right. It's very rare that I have somebody who's like dropping triple digits and everyone else is dropping 5. Okay.
Unless it's shit.
Yeah. But if you're going to have a wide open matchmaking, the odds that somebody in that match is exponentially better than the average of that match and therefore is going to blow that lobby out, much higher. And that's that's ultimately the problem, right? That's what they're solving for here. And honestly, with if X Defiant ever launches, I mean, this is going to be the challenge, right? How are you going to deal with the fact that the best players are going to mop every lobby, like there's not even anybody there? And how are you going to deal with the players that just and everybody says, oh, I'm only in how many lobbies? Like, how many lobbies can I possibly be in a day? So I can't ruin your day all the time, right? This is like the high skill player response. And the answer is, well, okay, but if I'm a bad player and I hop in a lobby and I get mopped by somebody, I hop in a lobby and somebody else mops me. I mean, I might get mopped by a 2 KD player. I might get mopped by a 1.5 KD player. Heck, even a 1 KD player in a lobby where like the average is like 0.5. They're gonna take everyone to task, right? And so if I never get a chance where like the top of the lobby is like a 0.5, right? Like I'm not gonna have any fun. Like it will never be fun for me because I'm always the one that's like, the guest star on everyone else's TikTok reel.
Yeah, and I think as a community, we kind of lost sight of that and not recognizing that Activision's whole goal, right? People think it's profit, which I think that's the ultimate goal, but their goal is retention because retention leads to profit. So their first goal right off the rip is player retention. And so the get good scrub and, those kind of things, while they're funny to say to our friends, it's that mentality, I think, is why random people on Twitter just can't seem to have a conversation like this or a conversation about these things that we're talking about in in an honest way, right? And without being disingenuous towards one another. Like, and that's where the struggle and the line is drawn between the quote dad gamers with 65-inch TV casuals and, you know, the sweatiest of the sweats. You know what I mean? Like, and they both sit here and just take these shots at each other, right? But nobody is really recognizing what Activision is trying to do, and it's retain players. So it's unfortunately, I think all sides, based on currently what it is, they're going to have to just eat a little bit of crow and eat crap.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
at one point in time or another.
Yeah. Think about it like this: you know, I mentioned this earlier. The normal lifespan of any given game in game mode is 1 year, right? It's 12 months.
You talked about this last episode, actually, I think.
And right, and so you start out lot of players, like I mentioned, a lot of players, everybody figuring it out. There's a lot of room for everyone to have fun. And then what happens is players leave because there's another game that comes out that they want to play. They leave because they don't have as much time. They leave because they're constantly getting crapped on, and they have less fun. On and on and on. All these different reasons start cropping up, and people just put the game down and they stop playing. And so what happens is over time there are a few, and it's predominantly the bottom of the lobby, right? The bottom section of the bell curve starts quitting the game because there are other ways to have fun playing the game. I used to be one of those. I'd play for like 4 or 5 months. By month 5, I'm like, you know, once a week maybe logging in, play a little bit, getting crapped on, and I move on to another game. Warzone and the pandemic together changed that. And they changed it because, A, we were all stuck inside and we had nothing else to do, and the game was a heck of a lot of fun. But it stretched it beyond that 1 year cycle. And I think the last 2 years, we finally started to return to a normal cycle where everybody jumps in at the beginning, and then we start to see an attrition after a few months. And by the end, you know, the higher skill players and the players determined to stick with the game and improve it are the ones left playing until the next game drops, and then we get that resurgence of players coming back to try the new one. So, yeah, well, I mean, I think it's a really good starting point. I think we finally have a solid statement from Call of Duty that either, you know, that confirms a lot of the things we've speculated on, and raises some new questions and opens up some more doors for us to continue speculating. I'm excited to hear more about this going forward. I'm excited to hear about Warzone's matchmaking and how that differs. What about you, Jay? You excited for this?
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I'm actually very, very surprised. And you can see just the fact that they've addressed it, which they never had before the end of last year. There has been a culture change, I think, inside of Activision, and just a different way of going about it. And, you know, like you mentioned earlier, I think that Microsoft probably was like, hey, you guys got a serious PR issue you need to address. You know, we didn't spend this amount of money on your studio just to have people leave because y'all's matchmaking is fucked up. So I think that's likely what happened. And yeah, I'm excited to hear a little bit more, you know, to see how much different it is for Warzone, and if there are other factors they're considering in their matchmaking for Warzone specifically. But I think this is a good start, man.
Yep. So yeah, like I said, I'm excited for it. We will keep an eye on the next out for the next blog post. If it lands outside of our normal recording cycle, we will bring you another emergency bonus episode. It would be emergency bonus episode number 2, or if anything else comes up. Otherwise, we'll catch you on our next regularly scheduled episode. Once again, I am Sub1KD, joined by the illustrious J007 TV, and we'll catch you on the next one.